All right, guys, happy Monday. And well, ladies and gents, I will say it is not my style, but I have been keeping a major secret from you all. And I was admittedly bursting at the seams because it is without question the craziest thing that has ever happened to me in my entire life, certainly, at least in my political life, bar none. So, in case you were having an uneventful Monday, welcome back to Candace. Just have to say it's remarkable that so many people in the chat think that my secret is that I'm pregnant again. That is something that I would tease as unbelievable surprise. That actually would be the least surprising thing ever. But that is not the case. It's actually much crazier. And like I said, I've been holding on to this for a very long time because something happened all the way back in February. And I was sworn to secrecy temporarily. And I feel that today is the correct day to inform audiences because it may have some severe global implications. So here is what happened, all right? The date was Monday, February 24th. And in the early evening, I had just kind of wrapped the show. It was just after 5:30 p.m., to be precise. I received a very strange message from a friend of mine. I'm not going to identify that friend, but the message specifically read, "Hey, I have something to tell you from the White House. They asked me to call you. I'm just the messenger here." Again, strange. I'm just the messenger here, like kind of removing themselves from whatever was going to be said. So I assume it's got to be something weird. And I say, yeah, whatever, give me a call. And so he does call me pretty immediately, by the way. And he says, somebody very high up at the White House has asked me to ask you if, as a favor, you could stop speaking about Brigitte Macron. Like, what? Excuse me? I'm not kidding when I say that in the myriad of possibilities that were floating through my brain about what this phone call was going to be about, that was not one of them. So I'm just kind of having to redirect and I'm going, oh, what were you talking about? To be clear, we had, ironically, as a podcast, we had just ended our Brigitte Macron series 4 days earlier on February 20th. That's when we released the last episode, which was the epilogue. So I'm going, that doesn't make sense. Why am I getting this phone call now? And obviously I ask for a little more information. I say, who specifically called you? And that friend of mine says, it's somebody that has the president's ear. This is somebody important. So I'm thinking, okay, this is advisor, Susie Wiles, I don't know. And I tell my friend, go back to that person and just say I said no. It's free speech. This is obviously an important story to me. The implications here are pretty severe about what I've uncovered. So no deal. Hang up. I go into my husband's office and I tell him what just happened. And honestly, I'm kind of laughing at the absurdity of it because I hadn't thought beyond what may have happened. And then I do what I always do just in case. I call Noah. I call the lawyer and I'm like, hey, I know Macron's, sending us legal letters. Just want you to add this onto the pile that somebody at the White House is asking me to just stop speaking about Brigitte Macron. Cool. We kind of have a laugh about it, run it different ways. Are we going to expect something else to be delivered to my door? Another threat, implicit threat from the Macrons, somebody calling in a favor, who knows, whatever. Anyways, we do dinner and I am kind of feeling bad about my pregnant attitude on the phone call, because I was, 8 weeks away from birth. And I was a bit shorter on the phone than I would have been if there wasn't like a growing infant foot that's lodged under my lung. And this person has been very good to me in the past. And so I resolve that before I go to bed, I'll phone him back and have a much more calm conversation. Not that I was rude, but just like, hey, what's this actually about? And so I did. And not only that, before I called this individual back, when I checked online, I realized that Emmanuel Macron is in Washington, D.C., February 24th. He is in Washington, D.C., and he had departed the White House just hours before I received the call. So anyways, I am in awe. A lot of thoughts are running through my mind. What could this possibly be about? And when I call that person back, they tell me something that is even stranger. They say, look, I again am the messenger here. What I was told from somebody that's pretty high up at the White House is that Emmanuel Macron is holding up negotiations to end the Russian and Ukrainian war unless you stop speaking about his wife. And I'm just going, what? What are you saying? What are we even speaking about? What do you mean negotiations between Russia and Ukraine? I'm just like, looking into a story at my house. I've got a very small team here, and you're telling me that somehow negotiations are being held up and it needs to be communicated to me that I got to stop talking about Brigitte? What are we saying? And then I'm asking myself in my mind, because I hang up this phone and I am in true shock. Did Emmanuel Macron pretend to fly into DC under the guise of negotiations, the Russia and Ukraine war, and then instruct someone on his entourage to have an off the books discussion, a little meeting on the side, maybe somebody again, like a Susie Wiles, where he made his truer demands? Like, hey, this is for the pictures. Me and Trump are talking about you. We're going to get it done. And then what really goes on behind the scenes is like, we're not doing anything until that little podcaster, Candace, agrees to shut her mouth. What? This is crazy. This is absolutely insane. Okay. So we ended the conversation. I say, I'm going to sleep on this. It's a lot to process. I remember I get into bed and I just turn to my husband and I say, no one will ever believe us. Just something that just arrived at me very suddenly. I said, no one will ever believe that this just took place. And my husband's like, yeah, no. This is just very, very strange. And I promised the individual that I would pray on it, that I would think further about the situation. What are the implications here? And I then call him back the next day and I say, look, this is pretty weird. You have to admit this is pretty weird. And you're not really giving me any details. And I kind of want to know who specifically you spoke to, because I think it kind of matters. Is somebody trying to do a side deal while Trump is doing a different deal? And at that moment, he's honest and he says, no, President Trump was on the phone too. And I go, oh, are you kidding me? You didn't tell me this yesterday? That there was some sort of a conference call and President Trump is on the line? You didn't mention it. I go, did you lie to me yesterday? Were you trying to pretend that it was like a third party person? And he says, no, I didn't lie to you. I didn't lie to you. Like, I got a phone call and I obviously in the background, Trump communicated something to me. So he was there when the phone call took place. And I'm going, what the heck is going on? Literally, what is happening right now? So I got the phone with him and I just say, I just need time to process what you're saying. This is so absurd. How could this become an issue that is involving the President of the United States? I'm doing a series on my podcast. And then I just kind of get into mommy mode because it's Tuesday. My daughter's got ballet. I'm at ballet with my daughter. And I get a text message from that person that says, you need to pick up the phone. Somebody from the White House is calling you. And I say, okay, it happened so quickly. I pick up the phone and sure enough, it is somebody at the White House that is calling me. It's not Donald Trump, but it's somebody at the White House that is calling me. That's pretty high up, close proximity to Trump. I'm not going to name. And this person just, I assume, has never even watched 1 minute of my content because, I mean, if there were a guide to how not to approach Candace Owens when you are trying to get something done, he was just following this guide. He could not have been more pompous and more arrogant on the phone. And I would like to contextualize that I'm like pretty heavily pregnant. So like, my bandwidth for BS or anybody trying to like, well, it was very low. And he essentially says, look, you should do it because it's the president and he's asking you to do it. What else do you want me to say? Just do it. Just stop talking about Brigitte Macron. It's astounding. Reflecting on that level of arrogance because he told you to do it. It's an order, so you should do it. And all I was thinking in my mind before I flew into, a little rage was that expression, proximity to power can lead others to diluting that they wield it. You're close to power. You think you're now Trump. You're calling me, even if you were Trump, this wouldn't be the way to speak to me. And you're calling me like that's an order from the president of the United States. So you just do it. No questions asked. Don't even think about freedom of speech. Who cares about that pesky little First Amendment? You got to just do it now. And I just basically say, look, my daughter's crying because she doesn't like when I step out of ballet, even though she can see me. She's, please, mommy, come back in. You're speaking to me inappropriately. And I just say, I don't really care I don't know who you think you're speaking to, but this is not how you're going to get anything done with me. And I just hang up the phone. I'm like, this is just not a good conversation. I don't want to be part of this anymore. Goodbye. I don't like that at all. And the third party person who had initially told about the situation is trying to calm down, and he calls behind. He's like, no, I don't know why you're spoken to like that. And like, this is still really important. And, this really matters to the president. And he's kind of trying to talk me off the pregnancy cliff. And I'm still calm enough that I know that pregnant Candace is not always the most rational Candace, and a little bit of a hothead. And I resolve, as I'm speaking to this situation with my husband, that I should also reach out and maybe call someone who's potentially been in a predicament like this. I don't know, someone who's got a larger audience than me, and kind of call in a favor, because I don't normally text him, but I did reach out to Tucker Carlson. And I just kind of told him the situation and was like, look, this is really weird. I know I don't normally contact you for advice, but I could really use some advice right now because you know how much free speech matters to me, and basically how important this particular story is to me, because it involves, potentially, not just potentially, like pedophilia, incest, all of these elements. And as a mother, the idea that people this powerful, that the story could be covered, it matters. Like, this actually, the truth just matters at the end of the day. But also, like, if I could end the Ukrainian and Russian war, and by just stopping this conversation, I would do it. And he comes back with just very sage Tucker Carlson advice. And he says, look, you don't want to have the bloodshed of Christians on your conscience, but also free speech does matter. And you should essentially say you'll do it until, like you're saying, this negotiations are happening now and you'll agree to do that. But at some point, obviously, you need to inform people about what happened, because this is totally crazy. And I say that's actually a very good idea. I feel like that's a very principled position to take. Anyways, I sleep on that. Anger is subsiding. Wake up the next morning. It's February 26th, and I am sitting in the makeup chair, and I get another message that's like, hey, keep your phone on. And I'm going, I really don't want to speak to this advisor anymore. I really don't. Where our personalities are not meshing. And anyways, this phone call is coming from Florida. I pick up the phone, and lo and behold, so here's what happened. I'm negotiating this thing. I'm negotiating Ukraine and Russia, and you wouldn't believe how many parts are part. It is President Donald J. Trump. He is calling me, and in true President Trump fashion, he jumps right into the narrative. We're not, hey, how you doing? He just like jumps right into the narrative of exactly how this went down. I am literally, it is hard to catch my breath to comprehend that 4 days ago, I'm ending a series about Brigitte Macron, and now I'm speaking to the President of the United States, and the topic of conversation, no matter which way you want to slice it, it's about Macron's wife's penis. I mean, there's no other way to say it, right? And so he just jumps right into the narrative. He's like, I'm negotiating. You wouldn't believe how many pieces this person wants this person, if this person wants this, and you have no idea how much is involved when you're trying to get one of these deals done, Anyways, I have Macron. I like Macron. We're speaking at the White House, and I'm walking him to his car. And, he says to me, Mr. President, can I speak to you for a second? I say, of course you can speak to me about anything. What's going on? And he tells me that there's Secret Service all around them. There's SUVs. They're encircled. And Macron wants to have a little sidebar. And then Macron says to him, Mr. President, do you know Candace Owens? And I say, Yes, of course I know Candace Owens. What's going on? And then the president says to me, you must be a very powerful person, Candace. We're talking about the president of France taking me aside to talk about your podcast. And then he continues his narrative, and he tells me that Emmanuel Macron is requesting to his face that I stop speaking about his wife. And one of the things Trump said is like, he tells me, she's old, and this is really, really impacting her. And I'm listening. And he's, in he's one of Trump monologues. He's very funny. And then he said, I saw her, Candace, I saw her up close and she looks like a woman to me. She looks like a woman to me. I had dinner with her at the top of the Eiffel Tower. And I explained to him that she has had this amazing doctor who specializes in transgenderism surgeries or feminization procedures. I'm talking to the President of the United States about this, guys. This is crazy. This is wacky. But I'm just giving it as good as I get. I'm just trying to get him to understand the truth. And then I explained to him why I don't feel so great about this request, because that's the more important part. Like, you are requesting that I really, and despite your reasoning, which is very sound, that I stop telling the truth. And I said to Trump, and I will be honest, that at that moment I realized that one day this is going to go into my autobiography. And so I got to say something funny. And I said to him, respectfully, Mr. President, it's not my fault that he married someone with a penis. He then tells me, we're really close to getting this thing done. We're really close to getting this thing done. He tells me again, Macron's been really good to me. He's been very easy to work with us. He's been a good person. He just wants me to get this one thing done. And he throws in the art of the deal type stuff. He starts complimenting me. He said, Melania loves you. She says you're so beautiful. She thinks you're so beautiful. I said, thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Mr. President. Compliments will get you everywhere in life is my mentality here. And then I say to him what I've agreed to already in the back of my head. I say, look, I'm happy to do this for the short. Obviously, I don't want to have on my conscience that less Christian men could have died in the East if I just shut up about something. But I'm very clear to him that this is going to be short term, and that I fully expect that in a few months I will be able to speak about this. And this is the point of the conversation where it actually gets quite interesting, because he says yes, and I am now adding to you what I sensed. Like, he was about to commit to that, but then it felt to me like someone in the background was like, no, we need this conversation to stop altogether. And then he doesn't say no or yes, but he just says, that he really needs to work with Macron long term, and they have this long working relationship. And I was very clear, this is not long term for me. Like, if you're close to this deal, ink it, let's get it done. And then he sort of offers at the end, he says, hey, maybe I can come on your podcast one day. I'm great for ratings. They're so Trumpian to give yourself a compliment. So I give him the Trump right back. And I say respectfully, Mr. President, I'm apparently good for ratings too, because you've got a leader of a country, the president of the country, asking you to ask me to do a favor. So then we end the conversation, and I am just reeling. I can't believe it's even happened. I then go and I immediately tell my husband, and I write down the details of the conversation so that I wouldn't forget the conversation that we were having. And of course, the first thing that I want to say principally is that Emmanuel Macron must step down. Okay? Because if that is true, and I will say that did not come from Trump. He did not say specifically he's holding up negotiations for this, but he did say specifically that they were talking about the Ukraine and Russia war all day, and he's just trying to make it all happen. And that is when Macron took him to the side. So I kind of trust the information who came from that third party person, that what he was being told was that he was holding this up. Right? Like, Macron's holding this up, a contingency here on whether or not he's going to agree to this sort of international deal is whether or not Candace Owens stops speaking about his wife. Yet you got to step down. Okay? Because there is no greater example of just the lack of morality that a leader can have than his husband, wife putting him on a plane and sending him overseas to make Candace Owens stop speaking about their relationship. That is like, we really all should just take a deep breath here, take a step back, and recognize that he is willing to let bloodshed, he's willing to let people die, okay? And a holdup here is going to be whether or not Candace Owens stops speaking about his wife's penis. That's ridiculous. You are not qualified to hold office. I thought that before all of this, just looking into your background. I know you're a fraud. You know you're a fraud. Your wife certainly knows that you are a fraud. But this is reaching levels where that you just have to be impeached. That's absurd. That is like, let's get the impeachment trials going. And in my head, I'm thinking to Trump, actually, if you wanted to really negotiate, you could have said to him, how about I go live and tell all those reporters what you just said if you don't sign this document? That's how I would have played it. But, you know, I was like 7 months pregnant. I would have played hardball. I don't need to have friends when we're talking about ending bloodshed. But the second thing that I want to say here is that it's occurred to me over time that this is about much more than the Ukrainian and Russian war, right? That is not why his Mr. Macron put him on a plane to go speak to Trump in person about this issue, right? They did that because they are terrified. They are terrified because obviously everything I've uncovered is true. Fiction would not make you do that, okay? You'd go, this is so absurd. It's so crazy. I mean, who's going to believe that? Fiction does not make you fly 9 hours to the United States to ask the president if he has a moment to step aside out of the shot of cameras and speak about your wife, right? We can now, it is confirmed fact, put it on Wikipedia that Brigitte Macron was born Jean-Michel Trogneau. We can just go ahead and do that, right? But what did I hit at that has them really terrified? What was the success of that series? Looking into a web and understanding how deeply sinister whatever it is that is happening in Paris is. Looking into not just the current events, but the historical events. I mean, we put up a map and showed just how often they were involved in these pedophilic scandals. Silly ones. Putting the book for your Andre Gide, an admitted pederast, a guy who outwardly said, yes, I like young boys. And you choose that to be the book in your official portrait. As the president of France, Emmanuel Macron did that. And I think there's more. I think there's more that they are afraid of. I think that it was a very powerful person, potentially someone more powerful than Brigitte, who told Macron, who is just a total fraud, a puppet, to get on that plane and make this request after they realized that sending legal letters wasn't the best idea. So what else is it that I've potentially uncovered about France? How does this relate to the United States? I'm going to tell you in just a second. But first, I'm going to throw it to some of our sponsors. Let's speak about preborn, because June 24th marks 3 years since Roe v. Wade was overturned. And the hard truth is that abortion has not gone away. It's gotten worse. Abortions are at a 10-year high because the fight has moved from the courtroom to a place that's way more dangerous. Our homes. Today, more than 60% of abortions happen through a pill that is taken alone in fear without any support. And what happens next is pretty horrifying. Women are delivering their babies fully formed into toilets, onto bathroom floors. These babies, they realize in that moment, are not just tissue, they're human beings. And now those human beings are gone. And we should all be honest, irrespective of where you fall on the political spectrum, that is not healthcare, that's trauma. 11% of women who take the abortion pill face serious complications, and many will carry emotional scars for the rest of their lives. That's why I support preborn. They are stepping in where our culture is failing, giving women the truth, real practical financial support, and a chance to choose life. Preborn has already saved over 350,000 babies, but they can't do it without us, and the need has never been greater. For just $28, you can double the chance that a mom chooses life for her baby and for herself. So if you'd like to donate now, you can head to preborn.com/Candace. Again, that's preborn.com/Candace. Then there's Brickhouse Nutrition. Tell you about them because their July 4th sale is on. And for a limited time, you can save 25% off everything with code FIREWORKS25. That includes my favorite product, the Field of Greens. All the fruits and vegetables were doctor selected for a specific health benefit. Field of Greens is perfect for heart health, lungs, kidney, metabolism, and even for maintaining a healthy weight. 1 drink a day is all it takes. You'll look and feel healthier and have more energy. Field of Greens promises your doctor will notice your improved health or your money back. Everything from Brickhouse Nutrition is incredible. Listeners rave about their collagen peptides, and beauty experts swear that collagen is the fountain of youth for your skin and hair. So now is the perfect time to get stocked up on their incredible supplements. Just head to brickhousenutrition.com and use code fireworks25 for 25% off. This sale's only on for a few days, and I know that their products do sell out fast. So head to brickhousenutrition.com and you can use code fireworks25. Again, that's brickhousenutrition.com. All right, you guys. Here's where I'm going to pull it all together for you. Because we all know, here's the reality. The greatest trick the devil ever played was making the world believe that he didn't exist. Okay? And I have this thing. Call it my toxic trait. When the media takes me out of context and then just tells these sort of unbelievable lies about me and my perspectives, I never get discouraged. I just get interested. That's my toxic trait. I get like, you can try to offend me, but I just get interested, especially when they're just being way too over the top, you know, like Holocaust tonight, whatever it is. If you're just being way too crazy, like self-hating Black woman, I'm like, what are you hiding? Like, you're obviously hiding something because you're way too triggered by what is likely, and listeners to the show now know, just a simple fact that I've delivered. And I'll give you an example of that. And I'll tell you how it relates to France and it relates to America. So back actually when I was at the Daily Wire, I did this episode and I was so interested in Sigmund Freud, right? Realizing that this dude was a total perv. I mean, just a total perv. And I gave examples of his like people that were surrounding him that were pervs, people that had been molesting their children. A lot too many of his friends had been molesting their children. And the reaction in the media was to call me unhinged and crazy and to defend Sigmund Freud as if he wasn't the guy who's writing all of these theories saying that like children are sexual and are just attracted to their parents. I mean, like totally weird. Like I'm not unhinged. He was unhinged, obviously. But them calling me that made me more interested. I'm going, why are you like so committed to defending this dead guy and attacking me? So I'm going to actually learn about Sigmund Freud, okay? So I order a book, and this is a book that was written by, you've heard me mention this before, by David Bakan. It's called Sigmund Freud and the Jewish Mystical Tradition. And essentially this guy posits in this book, and then he's able to verify what initially was his theory in the updated edition. He's able to confirm his theory was correct, that Sigmund Freud actually created the psychoanalyst movement to mainstream his religion, that actually he was practicing the Kabbalah. And if you look at the psychoanalyst early movement, as he does a very good job of assessing, you will recognize that they are mainstreaming the Kabbalah. Okay, so I'm learning about Sigmund Freud, and I happen upon this book, and I'm not just learning about Sigmund Freud, I am learning about a piece of history that I've never heard about in my entire life. And it concerns this guy, Jacob Frank, okay? He's this man who caused a schism. Like we always talk about like Christian schisms and, and actually every faith has this, obviously, Sunni, the Shiites, but we never have really heard, or at least I hadn't heard about this huge schism that took place amongst people that were Jewish, that there was this huge schism. And it talks about how this guy who thought that he was the Messiah, okay, got into some really perverted things. And I'm just going to just read you this, and I promise you this is so important. I think this is really what it's all about, okay? In this chapter, which is entitled The Frankist Episode, I'll read you a couple of things. It tells us that this guy, Jacob Frank, was born in 1726 in Korolovka on the frontiers of Podolia and Wallachia. It tells us that his father was a Sabbatean who had been expelled from the Jewish community. So again, getting back to this fracture that happened, and essentially people that felt that the old Torah law had been fulfilled and that new messiahs were coming, and one such messiah was this Jacob Frank. It goes on to say, the tales which have come down to us indicate that he was what we would today call a psychopathic personality, a person without any strong superego formation. In his new Sabbatean doctrine, he asserted the idea of the Holy Trinity. He distinguished himself between God as having become incarnate, and he assigned the role of Messiah to himself. It says, quote, the idea of a male-female God became the occasion for sexual religious practices. The law, he declared, was dead. The yoke of the old Torah had been broken. I'm going to read that again. The idea of a male-female God became the occasion for sexual religious practices. Okay? And so he would have these sexual parties, is the only way to describe it, where they would just do incredibly disgusting things. We'll get more into that later. He then begins to quote this Israeli historian who did a lot of research. I've read his books. His name is Gershom Scholem. And he explains that this religion believed, quote, the mystic does not even recoil before the inference that in a higher sense, there is a root of evil, even in God. The doctrine of evil was given support by the thesis that the holy sparks had been scattered, and it was necessary for men to hand themselves into sin in order to regather them. The idea of the holy sin became prominent. Through sin, salvation would come. From the great sinning would emerge a world in which there would no longer be sin. This is starting to sound a lot to me like Schofield Bible principles and like the whole idea of the rapture. But anyways, he goes on, Frank had declared, quote, I have come to rid the world of all the laws and the statutes which have been in existence hitherto. Another person explaining the sign of thought writes, the conception of the Messiah as he who must enter completely into the klippah, the demonic power of the shells, that he may liberate the holiness that is held there, and in doing thus fulfills the purpose of the exile of Israel and redeems Israel and the world in one. But even that is not enough. The holy sin becomes a pattern. Men must hurl themselves into sin in order to tear from it the holy sparks, and soon there is no sin any longer. And then he goes on to speak about how sexuality, like sex stuff, it hinges upon these sort of sexual parties. He writes, sexuality as the locus for the expression of personal freedom has, of course, deep roots. In the Zohar, the sexual metaphor is used very freely. The Orthodox tradition sharply restricted sexual expression, perhaps as has been suggested by some writers. And it tells us that the movement grew into a violent political threat to the Orthodoxy theocracy, and measures and countermeasures were taken by both sides. The Frankists were placed under excommunication, and the Frankists replied by an attack upon the Talmud, arguing that it was false and harmful. The Frankists even charged that the Talmud made use of Christian blood obligatory, and they lent testimony that the Jews were engaging in ritual murder. The climax of Frank's career came when he and all of his followers were converted to Catholicism with great pomp and ceremony. The members of the Polish nobility acted as sponsors, and the newly baptized Jews assumed their family names. Numbers of them thus came into Polish nobility. Jacob Frank himself had King Augustus III as his godfather and became a Catholic in the presence of the royal family and the court dignitaries in November of 1759, less than 100 years after the apostasy of Sabbatai Zevi, and less than 100 years before the birth of Sigmund Freud. Now, let me tell you why I'm telling you this. So I got interested in that. Someone who's thinking about becoming a Catholic, as I was, is learning that, whoa, okay, wait a second. I learned more about Jacob Frank. I realized that they believed that you had to practice incest as a sacrament. They believed that they basically just had to keep intermarrying one another and that they would achieve power. They believed in the cult of military. Essentially, like I said, going deeper into sin, the greatest sin that you could commit, because he said, I'll bring you down into the depths, would be this act of pedophilia. That they were having these rituals. I learned he entered the Catholic Church, so I'm not just going to end with that book. I need to learn everything I can about this guy, right? Because what's going on here? And the more I learned about him, I was positively astounded that they practiced also apostasy. So they believed that the way to take down your enemies was to convert into their faiths. If you wanted to take down Christianity, you had to become a Christian. And then from within, you could break down the church. Think about what the world was, the empires were Christian at this time, and they did this. His followers did this. They mass converted multiple times. We then learned that Frankists convert. Earlier in that earlier episode, he becomes Muslim. The Sabbatians became Muslim. So but they're all the same family, which is crazy. And so in trying to learn more about Jacob Frank, and I'm buying all of these books, and I'm going, is this cult still alive today? Is this really over? Because suddenly I talk about it on a podcast, and I've got all of these organizations screaming at me, going, this is a fringe cult. It's over. This isn't happening anymore. It's irrelevant. Oh, but they lied. Of course they lied, because when you freak out about something you shouldn't freak out about, if this was really a fringe cult and it's so over, why do you care? Like, why do you care if we're talking about something that's over? You know? Oh, it doesn't matter. It's irrelevant. And let me tell you guys, what I discovered right away was not only was this cult not over, but that it made it here to the United States. And we kind of like elected a Supreme Court justice that believed in this, like that Louis Brandeis came from a family of Frankists. See, Jacob Frank had sexual relations with his daughter. They believed in incest. They believed in breeding. You had to constantly have tons of children. And she became, because they were trying to kind of put the Catholic tradition on its head, they turned her into sort of like the unholy Mary. I know I feel blasphemous even saying that, but this is the reality of what these people believed in. And I'm just showing you this article, which explicitly says that we know. Can you pull up this JSTOR article, Skylar, just so we can pull this up here? Yeah. Meet Ava Frank, the first Jewish female Messiah. I want to show you this last sentence here. This is crazy. It tells us at the very end of that paragraph. Here we go. So we don't have to even buy it. Like, there we go. So it says, we know that U.S. Supreme Court Justice Louis Brandeis had such a portrait, speaking about Ava Frank, given to him by his mother, descended from a prominent line of Jews who continued to revere Ava Frank. And I looked into it, and she carried on for her father. Her father became a baron. Jacob Frank became a baron, like Baron Frank, who had a castle in Offenbach, Germany. These rituals were happening. And one of the things that they concerned themselves with was chemistry, starting like pharmaceuticals, right? And you go, what the heck is going on here? And then Ava Frank, before she died, wrote these red letters and told all of her followers, like, if you believe in this Frankist, this Frankist cult, then you need to apostatize again, like convert into various Protestant faiths, Christian faiths, and hide yourselves. These were called red letters that she sent to all of her faithful followers. But you're never going to guess, French people that are watching this, because everywhere I look, I'm starting to try to chase this like Frankist movement. Where is it? Its tentacles are everywhere. Then I buy a book from Gershom Scholem, that Israeli historian, and this book is called From Frankism to Jacobinism. Oh, like you're talking like the Jacobins, like the French Revolution, which was started. And lo and behold, I learn that one of the people that funded this movement in a very big way, and you may have heard his name, Junius Frey, that was his French name, because part of this movement, they believed, again, apostasy, take on a different character. It's like theater. Become someone else, be convincing about who you are, and we'll take over the world. And Junius Frey, actually, his real name when he was born was Moses Dobrushka. He was the cousin of Jacob Frank, and he learned French, went down into Strasbourg, and began funding people who rented a house, actually, and began funding people, writing, publishing about this revolution that needed to happen, fostering the revolutionary spirit. Can you pull up Moses Dobrushka's Wikipedia? Because this is really, truly incredible. It tells you Moses Dobrushka, alias Junius Frey. He was a writer, a poet, and a revolutionary. He converted from Judaism to the Catholic faith. He took the name first, Franz Thomas Schonfeld. So he apostatized once, became Franz Thomas Schonfeld, then did it again after he was elevated to the nobility in Vienna. So a lot of them were in Vienna. This book kind of makes that clear. Then became Franz Thomas Edler von Schonfeld. Then he became Junius Frey. You can see that in 1792, in the wake of the French Revolution, he traveled to Strasbourg to Paris and became a Jacobin, changing his name once again to Junius Frey. The new name derived from Junius, from the Roman Juni family that fostered the famous tyrant slayer Brutus. I am telling you guys, when you start looking into this and you realize that these people had a plot to crush empires and they just converted, and because then people don't know what's happening. Then, whoa, you're in the Catholic Church. You're going, what are these pedophile scandals? What's happening? What genius? And at the same time, you're just intermarrying within your own family. And they had faithful followers. It is one of the things that has really blown my mind, because we know that this sort of modern over sexualized culture. Whenever you speak to academics about it, they're like, well, it began in French, right? The French Revolution was sexual. And then I learned this and I realized that there is a theology to this, that people actually believe in this. And the fact that you are not allowed to speak about this without reporters coming to attack you should concern you. That tells you something's not dead, right? Something is not dead if you can't talk about it. No one would care. Like I said, if you talk about weird things that took place in history, it's just interesting. But you have all of these writers trying to protect this little piece of history. And we learned that these people became very involved with public. They knew that they had to control publishing houses. They created the music. There was so much writing. And it is interesting when you recognize that it made it all the way to America. Lyndon Baines Johnson was by the way, very, very, very obsessed with a couple of weird things that happened into America. We should probably get into that on my book club because I don't want to get like banned for speaking about that. Ooh, someone's calling me. I hope it's not the White House. It's not. We're good. And it's been interesting. It's been interesting to also recognize that a lot of this history is just being hidden from us. And when I think about us barreling toward this AI destination, which I think is happening right now, and children, so many of them who can't even read, who don't have the attention span to be able to read, who are asking AI questions and thinking that they're getting the true answers, I can just imagine a time where they just rinse the internet of all of this stuff, where people are no longer able to read books or don't want to read books, whatever it is, and they don't know this history. It's why I started my book club, because I was just amazed at how much happened that I don't know about. And I realized how much power we give the school system, the public school system, the publishing houses to tell us what we need to know. That's it. Oh, the French Revolution. Don't look at beyond that. It's just, some frisky French people and here's what happened and then that's it. No, but everything, as my husband told me when I asked him why he decided to master in theology, like why were you so driven toward theology when you went to university? And he says, because everything is theology. Everything's a faith. Faith is what guides people, right? And you think about Sigmund Freud turning his faith into something modern, right? Making you not even believe it's a faith, that it's a psychoanalytic movement. Oh, no, that's not a faith. That's what this book at least spells out pretty clearly with a lot of evidence. Yeah, that they could baptize you into their faith and you don't even realize it. And we're learning about this sort of mixture of the male and the female. That's what he believed in. And suddenly we're looking up and you've got all of these psychiatrists who are telling us that no, like transgenderism is totally a thing. I find that to be interesting, at least compelling, something that we can talk about. Like, that's interesting, very interesting. And now we have in Paris, Brigitte Macron. And rather than the publications being interested in that, they block it. They say, oh no, that's a crazy conspiracy. We could not have produced more evidence that something is not right there. And they will not even look at it. What does that tell you? Who is in power? Who are these people that are in power? I'll tell you one thing. They are people that understand the threat of anybody learning that this could potentially be a theology that is operating in plain sight. And like I said, I think in my book club last week, I said, are we the Muggles? To use a Harry Potter expression here, like, are we the Muggles? We have been led to believe that we're atheist, right? And I'm kind of going back to the old we, like, oh, atheism, like your grandparents were crazy to believe in the Lord, and oh my gosh, no, this is the new age. You're smarter. It's all about the self, what you can do. You're an atheist. There's no such thing as an atheist. There's no such thing as an atheist. You believe in something. And if somebody has turned you into a muggle while they very much believe God is real, because they created a whole doctrine and a philosophy that they are following, trying to convince us that they are the gods, right? That they can turn society into whatever it is they want, keeping us blinded because we don't realize that this is a spiritual battle, but they know it is, and they're fighting for your spirit and they're winning. Yeah. Pretty interesting stuff. Anyways, I gave you a lot to consider here. People are obviously all over the world waking up, and people are choosing goodness or they are choosing evil. And I will tell you that it feels almost like these events are being catalyzed, You're suddenly seeing people who you thought were real and honest and recognizing that they lie, whether that's a pastor, whether that's a political person that you follow, whether it's a newspaper organization that you're reading. I hope the point of this podcast, if you take anything away from my podcast, it's that you need to constantly examine who you're listening to and read these books, like educate yourself. And once you become educated, like I have said since the beginning of my career, an educated mind cannot be enslaved. And you'll start to previously examine your earlier enslavements. And I could say a lot, but I'd save the rest of it for my book club because we're reading a lot of this on my book club. And we'll save it for there. By the way, if you want to join the book club, CandaceOwens.com. I see that they put a little prompt up. So the conversations get pretty spicy, and we are definitely threading all of this together very slowly. And it's amazing and terrifying at the exact same time. All right, guys, now I'm going to tell you before I get into your comments. I can't wait to see what you are thinking. Whoa, 77,000 of you watching live. This is incredible. It's got to be some sort of a record close to it. Want to tell you quickly about Nimi Skincare. The 4th of July weekend is about to get a whole lot better because Nimi Skincare just dropped their biggest sale of the year. You can get 15% off everything at NimiSkincare.com, but only through the 4th of July weekend. So whether you're looking for refreshing cleaners, targeted serums, or hydrating moisturizers, Nimi has all that you need to glow from face to feet. Plus, on orders of $120 or more, you'll get a free Nature Burst antioxidant mask. If you're tired of supporting beauty companies that hate your values, then Nimi is your answer. They're proudly American, conservative-owned, and grounded in faith, family, and freedom. As a mom, wife, and someone who always is in the spotlight, I trust Nimi Skincare to keep my skin looking its best without compromising my values. Their products are packed with clinically proven ingredients, and everything is made right here in the USA. So when you support Nimi, you are choosing to support your friends and neighbors. You are voting with your wallet and supporting the parallel economy. This Independence Day, vote with your wallets. Do not wait. This sale ends soon. Head over to NimiSkincare.com and use code FREEDOM to save 15% on your entire order. That's NimiSkincare.com and use code FREEDOM to save 15%. Also remind you guys about American financing because costs are rising on everything, gas, groceries, home repairs. If you're a homeowner, you maybe have thought, should I call American Financing to try to refinance and pay off this credit card debt? And then maybe you second guessed yourself because of that low mortgage rate that you're currently enjoying. Well, listen, that low rate actually means nothing if you're drowning in credit card interest rates that are 25% or more. I mean, that's the math that no one wants to tell you, but it is costing you thousands. And here's the truth. If you're only making a minimum payment, that debt is going to follow you for years. That's why people are calling American Financing today, because they're saving customers an average of $800 a month by using their equity to finally break free from credit card debt. You owe it to your family to see what's possible. There's no upfront fees. There's no pressure. It costs you nothing to find out what you could be saving every month. And if you start today, you may be able to delay 2 mortgage payments. So do not wait any longer. Call American Financing today. The number is 800-795-1210. Again, that's 800-795-1210. Or you can visit AmericanFinancing.net/Owens. Again, that's AmericanFinancing.net/Owens. Something that I forgot to add, by the way, one more dot I want to connect for you, just so I can throw it all out here. Is that Jacob Frank's mother's her surname is Hirschl, spelled Hirschl. And I was able to connect a dot that they are related to Theodore Herzl. And I have that all in a file somewhere because this has been a long effort to get books. Some books are not in print anymore. And what would that say if Theodore Herzl was from a Frankist family? I know there's some very strange things about what happens with his daughters, and the only communication, this is very interesting, especially after you read this book, that Sigmund Freud and Theodore Herzl, they didn't really know each other, but clearly something happened, and Sigmund Freud sent him his work, psychoanalysis, if you will, sent him a book or a reference or whatever it was about the psychoanalytic movement. And he sent it to him to help him deal with his daughters. So I thought that was interesting. And then you learn that like his daughters committed suicide. Theodore Herzl, they say, oh, it's a terrible life. His daughters were just, dealing with mental issues. And now that I know what I know about Sigmund Freud, which is that he was covering for pedophilia, and that when he learned that a bunch of the women had been assaulted by their parents, he then gaslit them. Like, that's what he's famous for. He's famous for creating gaslighting. Like, that really is it. I have questions about Theodore Herzl. I do. I'm just going to put that out there. And I'm not going to put it out as fact, but just send you down to do your own research. And yeah, a murderous cult. They believed, like you learn about what the Frankists believe, and it was a military cult. And they'd say, I don't like it. I don't like that when I'm reading the theology, it sounds too much like when we get into people that believe that you have to kill. Like what happens if a genocide's happening is totally fine because it's going to bring in the Messiah. When you go backwards and see where that came from, it gets pretty terrifying quick. Okay. That's all I'm going to say about that before I read some of your comments. Who do we have first? We have Rose. She writes, the White House has some nerve to interfere with free speech and journalism. Truth is always important, no matter whose feelings get hurt. Yeah, so here's what I will say, and I'm going to be pretty even here. If you're Trump and you really are trying to negotiate the end of this war, and this guy throws it out there, and you are not someone who listens to podcasts, like Trump was very clear on the phone that he didn't even know what we're talking about. He's like, what are you doing? Like, what's happening that I have this president before me asking for you to shut up about his wife? Then he's going, okay, yeah, I know Candace. I'll call her and just ask her to stop talking about your wife. It's so silly. I don't get it. He did not watch the series. Like Trump did not watch the Becoming Brigitte series. So this was not a conscious, like, let me shut down speech. It was kind of like, could you shut up for a little bit so I could try to get this done? Again, that's me being charitable. I do think that he was motivated by goodness when he put in this request. I don't think the people necessarily around him were motivated by goodness. I do think that there was people that were more powerful that wanted this podcast to end, and they thought that that would be a good way to kind of massage Trump into agreeing with that. And I think that's been a lot, by the way, of this particular term, like going after free speech on college campuses. There are clearly people in his administration who would happily squash speech and I would say this particular administration is to defend the modern state of Israel. And I'm not okay with that. I've been vocally against that. But I don't think Trump was motivated by anything nefarious. And I have pretty good vibes and I can sense stuff. And I hope I'm right about that. I think I am right about that. Jane Roberts writes, I called this. My Amazon book review on Poussard's book, I mentioned that I think Trump has been communicating with Candace about her investigation. You're definitely on it, because people in the chat were just like, she's pregnant again, which is really funny. Dee writes, I love you, Candace. Moving to your beautiful state as of tomorrow. Please make the Macron reels stop. Their PR team is working overtime. Yeah, that's another thing that happened. So since that phone call with Trump, I then learned that the Emmanuel Macron circle, so I don't know if it was someone on Brigitte's team or someone on his team, they have separate teams, was communicating with crisis PR firms in Los Angeles. And I was told that those crisis PR firms, one that they were working with, that gave me the tip and told me this, was trying to get content removed from TikTok, because TikTok, as I have learned, have very strong rules against speaking about LGBTQ stuff. And so they were very successful. They definitely got all of our videos taken down. And since my phone call with Trump, we got 3 overnight strikes on our account. So we almost got banned from TikTok. And that was put on a 90-day hold before those strikes were removed. Again, those were clips from my Becoming Brigitte series. And so apparently protecting this kind of LGBTQ lifestyle is more important than free speech on TikTok. And they basically abused that. I'm speaking of the Macrons, abused that when they hired a crisis PR firm. By the way, again, is what Candace said about his wife true? Of course it's true, because you don't hire a United States-based crisis PR team to deal with fiction. I just would not. Who would do this? You could say whatever you want about me. If you just were like, Candace, Candace lived as a man for 30 years. I'm like, haha, okay, print your book. Do whatever you need to do, because it's insane. There's just so many photos of me growing up with my family, and in every high school text, high school yearbook, and from elementary spanning upward. It's just a nonsense. That's not how they are behaving. They are threatened. Melissa Delgadillo writes, excellent journalism. I love that you did not forego our values and what is important to you. You managed this incredibly well. Thank you. Thank you. I really appreciate that. And it was tough, and I'm definitely appreciative, first and foremost, to my husband, who always is the voice of reason at all times. But then also to Tucker, because I don't have a relationship with Tucker where I would just text him every day and be like, hey, what's for lunch? And I felt like he was the right person to speak to. And I think he had a very sensible Christian approach to it. Jessica Summit writes, off topic, but I just watched Surrounded. What the heck? The majority didn't even let you speak. It was an outright attack. Yes, you will see that I am at 9 months pregnant, thought it was a great idea to go debate feminism with 20 radical feminists. And I will talk about that tomorrow because it is quite funny. But you are right. There was just, I think people just get triggered when they see my face. They're like, attack. And so they didn't even want to debate. They just wanted to kind of land some high school disses or whatever. Anyways, we'll get to that tomorrow, promise. Ghosty writes, the next time we see a show title like this, Candace is going to say, she's pregnant again. Okay, fair. Maybe I am always pregnant. What do you want me to do? I'm Catholic now. I'm just saying the matter. It's up to God. And he's just like, yes, always to me. He's like, yes, you shall be pregnant again. Anyways, you guys, if you want to support our work, you can head to the website, CandaceOwens.com, and support any capacity. The book club is so worth the investment. Join the book club. It's getting really big. Ironically, they would not allow, we went out to the publishers of this book and said, we will sell this book for you. And they do not want to reprint it for some reason. So that's interesting. But I did get some emails that the PDF version of this book is available, so you can read it without even having to pay for it. That'll be our next book. We're still reading Hollywood Babylon. Also, if you are a new parent and you want to enter into the vaccine conversation, meaning know anything about the history of vaccines, which is also being completely hidden. And again, once I know what I know about Jacob Frank, Baron Frank, as he was living in Offenbach, Germany, makes me a little uncomfortable. Just big pharma, I'm just really off that. But anyways, if you want to learn about the history of vaccines, the history of birth control, definitely sign up to that series, A Shot in the Dark, that's available on our website. And you'll also get other free content. So it's totally worth it. And you get to support me. And I obviously, like I say, every episode, am not being funded by anybody in the Middle East. I'm funded by you guys who have believed in me, stepping out on my own to do this thing while being under just a full attack that I was last year for just being interested and wanting to learn more things and being called stupid. I love being called stupid because it's an invitation to get smart. I like getting smart, and then I can share the stuff that I learned. So keep calling me dumb. See you guys tomorrow.